She sent him $87,000 to a man who didn't even exist. And the worst part, it started with two harmless words. Good morning. What if the message that ruins your life doesn't look dangerous at all? What if it looks patient, warm, almost gentle? Stay with this story, because by the end, one tiny detail in one photo will change everything. And if stories like this pull you in, subscribe early, because this one gets darker fast. He called himself Daniel. Not flashy, not suspicious. That's the trick. The most effective lies almost never arrive wearing a mask. They arrive dressed like routine. He said he was an engineer working overseas, widowed, quiet, a man who had already suffered enough to seem real. He didn't flirt like a movie character. He didn't push. He didn't flood her with declarations after 2 days. He did something far more dangerous. He paid attention. He remembered her favorite tea. He remembered the story about her father. He remembered that she hated thunderstorms, but loved the smell after rain. The kind of detail that feels too specific to fake. And that's exactly how trust grows, not with fireworks, but with repetition. Small proof, tiny consistency, one message at a time. Here's the part people get wrong. They think scams begin with greed. They don't. They begin with relief. Relief that someone finally listens. Relief that your phone lights up and the message feels meant for you. And once someone becomes part of your morning, your lunch break, your last thought before sleep, they stop feeling like a stranger. They start feeling like home. Weeks passed, then months. Somewhere in that stretch of ordinary conversations, Daniel changed categories in her mind. Not someone online, not maybe, something closer, someone she trusted, someone she could imagine meeting at an airport, someone she could picture sitting across from her in a kitchen she hadn't even chosen yet, and then, almost invisibly, the future entered the chat. A visit, a fresh start, a life together. Not all at once. That would have been obvious. No, he planted it slowly, like seeds. A joke about finally trying her favorite tea. A remark about how peaceful her town sounded. A line about being tired of hotel rooms and temporary contracts. Tiny visions, tiny promises. The architecture of a shared tomorrow. But this is where the pattern shifts, because every love scam has a hinge. A moment when affection becomes leverage. And when it came, it didn't sound dramatic. No sirens, no explosions. Just a temporary problem. He was stuck overseas. A contract issue, he said. Then legal trouble. Then paperwork. The details changed just enough to feel messy, but never enough to feel impossible. He sounded calm. That mattered. Panic would have looked fake. Calm sounds honest. Embarrassed sounds honest. Ashamed sounds even better. He said he hated asking. He said he just needed a little help, just enough to fix things quickly. She sent $500. That should have been the moment the story ended. It wasn't. It was the moment the story proved itself to him. Because once one transfer goes through, something changes. Not just in his plan, in your own mind. If you sent the money, then surely the reason was valid. Otherwise, what does that say? So the next request came easier. Another issue, more urgent this time. More pressure, but wrapped in the same careful tone. Not forceful, never forceful. That's the point. Real manipulators don't shove. They guide. They let you walk into the trap believing it was your own decision. She sent $2,000. And if you're thinking, I would never do that, pause for a second. Because inside a scam, it almost never feels like a scam. It feels temporary. It feels solvable. It feels like a bridge payment before normal life begins, like patching a leak before the house is finally yours. Then came the 4 words. Don't you trust me? That sentence is a weapon because it doesn't sound like one. No threats, no yelling, just guilt. 4 words that flip the pressure back onto you. Suddenly the question is no longer, is this real? It becomes, am I failing someone I love? And saying no starts to feel cruel, cold, disloyal. That is how emotional fraud works. Not by overpowering judgment all at once, but by slowly recruiting your own empathy against you. So she kept sending more money, more trust, more of her future. Savings disappeared first, quietly, then loans, then money she didn't truly have, only money she hoped to replace once this temporary crisis ended and the real life they talked about finally began. Every payment seemed like the last one before the reward. Every transfer was framed as the final obstacle before relief. But relief never came. Only another message, another issue, another explanation. Like a hallway where every door opens into another hallway. By the time something in her gut tightened, the number had already become brutal. $87,000. Gone. And then he vanished. No warning, no goodbye. No final excuse. His number stopped working. His profiles were gone. The messages went still in the most terrifying way possible. Not with conflict, but with absence. Like a man-shaped outline had been lifted clean out of her life. Like someone erased a person with a single swipe. And this is usually where stories like this end. People absorb the shame. They stay quiet. They tell no one because fraud steals more than money. It steals dignity. It makes intelligent people feel foolish and kind people feel complicit. Most victims don't just lose cash. They lose their ability to trust their own memory, their own instincts, their own need for connection. Most people stop there. She didn't. And this is where the story stops being only about loss. Instead of collapsing, she began digging. Think about that shift. The same attention that once made her vulnerable now became a weapon. She went back through everything. Every message, every photo, every detail he ever sent. She wasn't looking for comfort now. She was looking for friction. For something imperfect in a performance built on precision. Because fake people make real mistakes. At first, there was nothing. The profile was too clean. The photos felt plausible. The stories fit together just enough. It was like trying to catch smoke with your hands. But she kept going. Late nights, screenshots, notes, timestamps, transactions. She rebuilt the relationship as evidence, piece by piece. Then she found it. Not a confession, not a typo, a reflection. One photo he had sent looked ordinary, casual. The kind of image your eyes slide over without a second thought. But in the background, small, almost laughably small, there was a reflected logo. Barely visible, easy to miss. The kind of clue that feels fictional until it isn't. And once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. This is the moment stories turn. Not with a loud reveal, but with a microscopic crack in the wall. One logo led to a real company. The company led to a location. The location led to a person. Not Daniel. Never Daniel. That revelation lands like a cold hand on the neck. Because it means the man who absorbed her grief, mirrored her loneliness, and spoke about their future was not trapped abroad in some complicated contract dispute. He was living a normal life in another country, with a job, a schedule, a routine, people around him who had no idea what he was doing when no one was watching. And here's the twist most scammers depend on. They assume exposure is unlikely. They count on distance, on embarrassment, on the victim deciding silence is easier than pursuit. In many cases, they're right. This time, they weren't. She didn't message him. She didn't threaten him. She didn't send one last desperate paragraph asking why. That would have given him time to run, time to delete, time to build another identity and disappear into a new inbox somewhere else. She did something far more dangerous. She got organized, messages, transactions, names, fake identities, profile links, photos, dates, patterns. She stopped being a victim in private and became a witness with records. And then she sent it out to his workplace, to people connected to him, to the platforms he used. That part matters because online fraud thrives in darkness, but ordinary life is built on visibility. Employers care about reputational risk. Platforms care when patterns of fraud are documented. The people around someone like this may know nothing, until suddenly they know everything. At first, nothing happened, and that silence must have felt familiar, terrifyingly familiar. Another void, another chance for the world to shrug and move on. But pressure, when applied in the right place, doesn't always look dramatic in the beginning. Sometimes it looks like delay, then review, then questions, then everything moved at once. Accounts started disappearing. His name started circulating. The very thing he had used as a weapon, careful identity management, started turning against him. Because if you build your scheme on multiple profiles, multiple stories, multiple masks, then once one thread is pulled hard enough, the whole costume can come apart in public. Questions were being asked, and the life he built began to crack, piece by piece. Imagine that. A man who hid behind a screen, who knew how to mimic intimacy, who probably thought distance was armor, waking up to discover that distance no longer protected him, that the invisible wall between his fake life and his real one had collapsed, that the names he used online were now connected to the name people around him actually knew. He thought he got away with it. He didn't. Investigations followed, and this is where the emotional rhythm changes again, because revenge stories tempt us into wanting cinematic closure. Arrest, confession, money returned in full. A perfect ending tied with legal certainty. But reality is rougher than fiction, and often more painful. Did she get the $87,000 back? No. That's the wound at the center of this story. No grand recovery, no magic reversal. The money was gone. The trust was gone. The version of her life built around our future was gone too. And maybe that's why the truth hits harder. Justice, when it comes, rarely arrives in the shape we wanted. But don't mistake that for failure, because she did something many people never get to do. She disrupted the machine. She turned private manipulation into public evidence. She made sure the man behind the fake tenderness could no longer move as freely, no longer count on total invisibility, no longer assume his next target would meet him in the dark with no warning. And that changes the meaning of the story. This is not a happy ending. It's a real one. There's a difference. A happy ending says everything was restored. A real ending says damage happened, and then someone decided damage would not be the final word. She lost $87,000. But she forced consequences into a place designed to avoid them. She lost money, but she took away his safety. She was deceived, but she refused to let the lie have the last line. And here's the part that should make your stomach tighten. Somewhere right now, this minute, someone is receiving a message that looks harmless. A kind reply, a thoughtful question, A man who remembers details, someone patient, someone who listens, someone who feels astonishingly real. Why wouldn't they believe it? That's how it starts. Not with fear, with comfort, not with pressure, with routine, not with obvious danger, with a soft voice asking about your day. That's why romance fraud is so effective. It doesn't ask you to suspend disbelief all at once. It teaches your nervous system to relax first. Then it introduces a problem, then another, then another. Every new crisis arrives after enough emotional investment that helping feels natural, almost inevitable. And there's always a line meant to trap your hesitation. Don't you trust me? Listen to how that works. It bypasses facts and goes straight for identity. Good people want to be loyal. Compassionate people don't want to abandon someone in need. The scammer knows this. He isn't inventing kindness. He's harvesting it. Some people argue victims should just know better. That if a person sends money to someone online, the warning signs must have been obvious. But that view misses the whole architecture of manipulation. Scams like this are not failures of intelligence. They are attacks on trust, loneliness, hope, and consistency. The same emotional wiring that makes human relationships possible is what gets exploited. That's the counter-argument we need to say out loud. Shame protects scammers. Silence feeds them. Judgment helps them more than it helps victims, because every person too embarrassed to report, every person too afraid to tell family, every person who thinks, I should just move on, that is space a scammer can keep using. And there's another hard truth. Technology makes this easier, not harder. A fake identity can now feel textured, personal, persistent. Photos, voice notes, daily check-ins, small details carried over from one conversation to the next. What used to require proximity now requires only patience. So what do you watch for? Not just money requests. Everyone knows that part. Watch for speed disguised as slowness. Watch for intimacy that feels engineered, too attentive, too available, too perfectly responsive. Watch for futures discussed before a present has been verified. Watch for obstacles that always seem temporary but never end. Watch for the way guilt enters the conversation exactly when your doubts begin. And if someone online ever asks for financial help, especially after building emotional closeness from a distance, stop, freeze the moment, verify everything, reverse image search photos, check inconsistencies, ask yourself a brutal question. If this person vanished tomorrow, what proof of their real life would remain? Because that is the hidden test, not how they make you feel. What can be independently verified? That tiny reflected logo in a photo? That was the crack that exposed an entire fantasy. But most people never get that lucky. Most scammers are caught, if at all, through patterns. Repeated stories, repeated excuses, repeated emotional scripts, the same methods, recycled on different hearts. So if this story feels extreme, remember the most frightening thing about it. It was ordinary. Ordinary enough to begin with, good morning. Ordinary enough to feel safe. Ordinary enough to pass beneath the alarm system in the mind. Until it wasn't. By the end of this story, I told you one tiny detail would change everything. It did. A reflection, a logo, proof that a lie, no matter how polished, is still built in the real world, and the real world leaves traces. That's the open loop closed. He wasn't overseas. He wasn't Daniel. He wasn't trapped. He was hiding, and she found the seam. If this story hit you, send it to someone who thinks they'd never fall for a romance scam. That confidence is exactly what these predators count on. And if you like this kind of story, subscribe. It really helps the channel. because the next message you get might not look like danger at all. It might look exactly like love.